Welcome to EDO Breakthrough, the podcast where we tackle economic development challenges head on. From small towns to bustling cities, every place has its own hurdles to overcome. The EDO Breakthrough podcast creates an environment of collaboration, innovation, and understanding where we can share our real-life challenges and brainstorm solutions. I'm your host, Sandy Dubé, a certified economic developer and founder of PPR Strategies. Each week, we'll be welcoming a different, brilliant, place-based mind to talk through real-life economic development challenges that have been shared with us by you, our gracious listeners. This week, I'm chatting with PPR Strategies VP of Strategy, Heather Gramm. Heather, could you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me this morning, Sandy. I'm excited for our conversation. So I'm Heather Gramm. I'm VP of Strategy at PPR Strategies. I've been in economic development for a little over 20 years. Had the opportunity to work at the city level, at the county level, at the state level, and have a lot of different experiences through that work. Earned my certification early on in my career, which was really important and transformative to my professional growth and career. So I joined PPR Strategies about 9 months ago and have really been loving the team and getting to know life in the private sector, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about today.
I love it. So I don't know if I've talked about you in previous episodes of the podcast, Heather, but yes, as you know, and some of our listeners know, that you and I have been friends for close to that 20 plus years, which is pretty cool. We are just so excited to have had you as a member of the team. We both obviously worked in the public sector, but you worked in it for those full 23 years. I was out of it a few years ago and before starting the company. So I'm curious, and I'm sure our listeners would love to hear, people I know ask you all the time, why? Why did you make this move? What were you thinking, crazy lady? What would you like to, how do you answer that question?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it is one I get all the time. And I will say that for me, after 20 some years in the public sector, I really came to realize that I've done a lot of different things. I've had a lot of different experiences in community development and traditional economic development. And I wanted to be in a role and in a place where I could really apply all of those skills and have a bigger impact. Working for the state of Maryland is impactful. It has a big impact statewide, but the opportunity to work with different communities, I think, is really where some magic can happen, right? You really get to apply all of those things that you've learned, but in unique ways that really match the character of those communities. And it's just a completely different experience. And it just felt like the right time to kind of flex new muscles and learn new skills and grow personally and professionally by, making that jump to the private sector. And I'm really glad that I did.
That's awesome. One of the things that Heather, you and I joke about, and I mentioned again recently, was when we had a recruiter doing PPR. I had hired a recruiter to just identify some talent. And so if anybody is listening and thinking, we're always looking for the best new talent that's out there, or the best talent that's out there, it might be interested in joining the team. So I'd be curious to have that conversation. But a couple of years ago, the recruiter had identified you and reached out to you. And I laughed and we laughed and said, well, at least they got the algorithm right. And at that time, you weren't ready to leave. You were assistant secretary for business and industry sector development in the Maryland Department of Commerce. That was a big thing.
Yep.
It was a lot. And I know I have certainly respected and enjoyed seeing your career growth, but you're right, coming into this interesting private sector company that's able to support all of these public, nonprofit, different types of communities and organizations. you're right. We do get to kind of flex the muscles a little bit differently. And when we work outside of one particular state or can tap in on different regions and things like that, it can be personally and professionally rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you, even working at the statewide level, when you get very niched into the work that you're doing, and sometimes you have to take a step back and widen your lens, broaden your lens. And I think this role has allowed me to do that as well, right? And I used to say that one of the things I loved about economic development was that it was something different every day. And I find that to be true again, back at PPR Strategies, because our clients are so different and we get to do something a little bit different every day. And I love that.
I was a little concerned when I first started, like the real focus about 15, 20 years ago on economic development, thinking that, it was going to be hard to differentiate. It was going to be, too weirdly competitive. But you're right. Every community and or office has different strengths that they want to do in-house and then things that they want or need some outside support. So it's fun being able to do kind of flex one muscle with one community or organization and then work on something totally different for another.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
What have you found as some of the biggest surprises for you in working across communities, working across states? What has that process been like for you?
There's definitely been a little bit of a learning curve, of a mind shift around how you have to adjust yourself and your thinking as you move from working with one client to the next. And so work is a lot more varied. And I think that it has surprised me at the variety of clients that PPR works with, communities of all sizes, and being reminded that even though every place is unique and has its own character and authenticity, there's also, a lot of similarities between communities in terms of some of the challenges they face and the opportunities that they can embrace, and just figuring out how to do that in a way that matches that authenticity and character of that community, right? That's where the differences come in and where the magic happens. So it's been fun, and it's been an interesting, I don't know if I would call it a surprise, but a reminder of things that I had learned early in my career that I kind of forgot until I stepped back into this role and saw it up close,
Yeah, it is different. And I think you're right. Sometimes we're like keeping the hamster wheel moving, constantly, and oftentimes need to take pause for a second. And I always say, like, I always go for a walk if I need to change my mindset, if I need to think about something different. That can be a reset. Sometimes it takes a little longer for a reset if it's like a real big thing. Then maybe, that's when you need a vacation, or you need a day off, or you need a job change, or to work on a new project that gets you, thinking, learning, looking through it, with a different lens. While we're recording this, you're in Maryland and I'm actually outside of Dallas, Texas, at the Texas Economic Development Council meeting, where I spoke yesterday. And it was interesting this morning listening to, these Texas economic developers kind of talk about what they've got going on and their structure, and the cities and their EDCs that they have, and strong energy power conversation, and there's so much that is so similar to really anywhere USA or anywhere in the globe, but how we apply it, how we partner, how we choose to collaborate, and then are able to structure a deal or support our entrepreneurs can be so varied.
Yeah.
And that's kind of that is a little bit of that kind of art and science of economic development, which we've also been talking about a lot
Yep,
lately.
absolutely. Absolutely. There is a science, there's a foundation. There are the things that really are, those essential skills and tools in the economic development profession. But so much of it is art. And that's something that you have to learn by doing and experiencing over your careers, how to apply that and see the magic happen on the art side of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. So obviously you and I kind of have been ingrained in our entire professions as just like a deep-seated love for all things economic development. How would you say you bring kind of your own version of energy and passion to projects that you're taking on?
It's a really great question because I'm not really sure until, we started having some of these conversations that I really knew, what that looked like. Do I have energy and passion? And the truth is I do, right? And in a lot of ways it's easy and natural because I am so truly passionate about the work that we do in economic development. And it gets me excited every time I start thinking about, creative new ways to support communities and really help them grow and thrive. And so I think you just have to remind yourself every day about why you do the work that you do, why it's important, what that impact is, and bring your enthusiasm for the profession and for the work into every community and client that you work with. And like I said, just believe so much in the work that we do. It's really, an easy thing to wake up every day and be like, I'm going to get excited about this thing that we're working on today because it truly is exciting.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've been thinking about the next generation, and career opportunities and a community. And, between, your boys are about the same age as Tabitha. And, so we've got these, 20 somethings that are working. And so helping communities to create opportunities for that next generation, or, current generations to be having a place where they can live and work and add value and have that sense of community and sense of like belonging and place is so interesting. I'm curious, and I'm going to deviate from some of our prepared questions for a second. And I'm curious, like, what your kids and think about. What do the boys think about when you talk about economic development? I'm convinced Tabitha still has no idea what I do. She just knows that I travel a little bit and I work all the time and I try to have fun when I'm doing it. Like literally, I should have her on this podcast to get like her insights. But I'm curious, over the years, you've been at city, county, state levels, and now are working cross states, cross projects in other ways. What do your boys think?
I would have to agree with you. I don't know that my boys know what I do still, right? They're 23 and 25. And I can remember when they were younger and I was working at the city level, we would go out shopping for school clothes, or we'd go out for dinner or to grab a cup of coffee or some ice cream. And everywhere we went, of course, I knew a lot of people, right? I was very ingrained in that community, and they just would roll their eyes and say, "Oh, Mom's stopping to talk to somebody again. Mom, is there anyone you don't know here?" And I'm like, "Well, it's because of my job." And so I think all that they know is because of the work that I do. I get to work very closely in communities, and I know a lot of people. And they probably know that I spend a lot of my time talking, because when I get home, I'm like, I need some quiet time, everybody. Nobody talk to me because I've been talking all day. And but it has been interesting as they have grown up. Both of them actually chose, rather than to go into college and pursue, a degree, they both chose the apprenticeship path in construction. And they're doing fabulous. They're living on their own. They bought their own homes. And it's been a great reminder to me. That's kind of what we've been talking so much about, right? In workforce development, is the different career paths and how you find your way, and that college isn't right for everybody. And I remember thinking as they were graduating from high school, I thought, oh, maybe college isn't right for my kids too. And it was like one of those moments where the light bulb kind of goes off, and what you talk about and preach every day in your work matches up with your personal life and what's happening with your own kids. And it's like, that's kind of cool. And I can now say, in a very real way from experiences to people, it's okay if college isn't the path for your kids. There's a lot of different places, directions that their careers can go. So that was a really interesting kind of intersection of work life and home life, watching them take that path.
That's pretty awesome. Yes, to know that it works and it's there and it's an option for them instead of forcing them to do what society told them at one point was the only thing that they could have done, and they would have just wasted money and time and been miserable. Instead, they were able to kind of more directly do something very hands-on, very contributing to this development growth space that we're in, also kind of helping to build the future, literally.
Yeah, working on some very cool construction projects. And then of course, both of them are working on like data center projects, which is a huge topic of conversation in this region around data centers. And so every time I have these conversations with, clients or whatever it is around the data center hot topic, I'm like, yeah, well, my boys are building them right now. So I'm personally very happy that, that there are data centers to keep them busy. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And isn't that funny? Because Tabitha obviously took a different route and did go to college, but is now, I'm convinced, going to be working with your boys in some capacity on a data center project as well. So she went to college, but still, ended up back in the construction boots and, the steel-toed shoes and the hard hats, and is muddy every single day. So
love that.
Oh, well, kind of shifting back to the stuff, although I think we could talk about, kids all day long, but I don't know if our listeners want to hear about that. But in, part of what we do, at PPR in terms of helping communities to identify, figure out, their unique assets, their unique strengths, creating that, going back to a SWOT, your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and threats, figuring out where you can and truly thrive. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that discovery process for helping a community to come to some of that identification and realization?
Yeah, sure. So strategy work is one of the things that I really love doing with communities. And, part of that discovery process, yes, there's a lot of data that you want to dig through and understand workforce and population and demographics and all of that great stuff. But I think, like we talked about before, the science and the art, kind of where the art comes in is really taking time to listen, right? So that discovery process is really spending time with that community, having meaningful discussions and focus groups and, kind of one-on-one conversations with the key players in that community. And through those conversations, you start to pull out kind of the things that don't show up necessarily in the data, but are assets maybe that they haven't thought about before, that are strengths that they haven't thought about before. And, it's not just about having an asset in the community. You can have a university or a federal facility. A lot of communities have a university or a federal facility or whatever that asset might be. What makes what you have unique and different that you can build on? And, that's part of that discovery process, is talking through the things that are unique about the assets in that community and really pulling on those threads and figuring out how you can then leverage that in a way that matches what the community envisions for itself and how the community wants to grow. Because not every community wants to grow in exactly the same way. And so you have to tailor those strategies to align with those, growth goals and what the community sees itself being in 10 years and 15 years and 20 years. And that discovery process is really important to understanding not just your SWOT analysis or the assets in the community, but getting a real sense of where those communities' values lie and how they see themselves, so that when you get to the strategy conversation, you can match it all up in the art of economic development.
It is interesting because I hear you talk about, the community's input and, listening and things like that. And, we're obviously, oftentimes we're working with the economic development director as a lead, or, whatever that organization might be as a lead, but they are just one voice. They might be the convener. They might be the one that is, kind of spearheading something. But they are not the sole voice and sole opinion of what the current landscape or the future certainly could be. And figuring that out, I love what you said about, just listening to others, but making sure that the others individuals and enough individuals of variety can have a voice and feel heard in that process is so important.
Yeah, and really making sure that through those conversations, to your point, there's a lot of diverse needs in the community, and you have to make sure that those voices are being heard so that, you really, at the end of the day, come up with a strategy or outcomes that the whole community can buy into and feel like is like, yes, that is exactly what we were thinking would be good for our community, and that discovery process helps build that consensus, if you will, or build that buy-in at the community level.
Yeah, my mind went to, I think that communities have been doing a better job. I think we in economic development have been doing a better job in some recent history, but we certainly have room to improve, but making sure that we're not just inviting people to the table that have the same opinions that we do and have the same perspectives and background, but getting out of our comfort zone a little bit and, engaging with other church communities that we don't tap into all the time, other, community groups, ages, skill sets, race, gender, all the things, even segments of a community. If you're in a county, making sure that you're getting some of those more rural, not just city center focused voices and opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so one of my favorite topics is professional development and kind of all things support. And you've obviously, we've known each other and have worked together and stayed connected. But I think MEDA, the Maryland Economic Development Association, has been a pretty stronghold for both of us in our careers as a support base. And, obviously listeners may or may not know that we, have been working with MEDA. They've been a client of PPR Strategies for almost 20 years. I think October, November will actually officially be 20 years that we've been supporting MEDA, which is so amazing.
That's awesome.
But you've been, president, past president, MEDA's first Rising Star award recipient, which was amazing. Can you talk about, just your experience with MEDA and, your kind of thoughts and how that organization has helped you evolve as a professional over the years?
Absolutely. I have been a member of MEDA for probably 20 years. And that organization, being a part of a statewide organization like that, especially when early in my career, I was, again, working at that city level, helping to broaden that lens, to give that statewide perspective, to be able to come together with other colleagues that are in different communities facing maybe similar challenges and be able to hear about, creative ways that they're solving those challenges. So, the networking and connecting with colleagues, but MEDA was also played a huge part in just my professional development, which people who know me know that I am passionate about professional development and lifelong learning, and a huge cheerleader for the Certified Economic Developer certification through IEDC. And I was able to take a lot of those classes through IEDC very early on through the Lofton Scholarship Program that MEDA offers, which helps cover costs for professional development. So that was really, early on, very supportive of that. And then, just watching the evolution. You mentioned the Rising Star Award, and that was 7 years ago now, 8 years ago, if you can believe it. So watching MEDA also build this young leaders group, which is so exciting for me to see these new young professionals coming together and getting integrated with the economic development community in Maryland. And I think faster and easier because of the connections that they're able to make through MEDA and the Young Leaders Group. I've aged out of the Young Leaders Group, but it was really important, for me early in my career when I was younger to make those connections through MEDA. So I highly encourage other economic development professionals get involved with your statewide association. It can have a big impact personally and professionally.
I think I've shared on the podcast, but I know I haven't shared with you on the podcast, but you were one of 2 certified economic developers during a training when I was saying my spiel about how my biggest career regret was that I was not certified. And you said, Sandy, it's not too late. You could still do that. I'll never forget it. It was in July 2022. And gosh darn it, you planted that seed, and I ended up sitting for the exam in, a year later in, May of 2023 and passed. And so I thank you. Thank you for encouraging me and or not discouraging me, but really encouraging me. If you hadn't planted, got me thinking about that potential, I never would have done it.
Oh.
And I would have still been living that old story.
Well, I was so excited when you decided to take that path. It was really, really awesome. So I'm glad I planted the seed too.
And before we wrap up, I'd love to hear any advice that you have for maybe somebody that is either new to economic development or is thinking like, oh, maybe this public path isn't the right for me. Maybe working in one community isn't right. Maybe I need to be able to support lots of different communities. What kind of advice would you give?
Advice for new economic developers. Again, I think pursuing professional development opportunities, whether you are new to economic development because you're in your 20s or you're new to economic development because you made a career change. I think that while there is an art to it, there is also a science. So learn it, immerse yourself in it, and seek mentors. I think that I had many informal mentors, I would say, throughout my career, people who really gave me opportunities, gave me good career advice that I might not have even realized was career advice. But having a mentor, formal or informal, to help you grow professionally and to help you kind of learn your approach to the work that you're doing in economic development and where you want your career path to go is really important. And so I really encourage that piece of it. Professional development and mentorship are 2 things that I think are really, really important, no matter what phase of your career you're in, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then any advice to somebody thinking about, hey, I'm working in the public sector right now in this one community. What's it like? What should I be thinking about as I could be considering other career options versus leaving economic development altogether?
Right.
Should I shift into a more private model?
Yeah, I think, the first thing I would say, if you're thinking about a career change or going into private sector, is kind of follow your heart on it, follow your gut. It can feel scary to take that leap, from public to private, but at the end of the day, the work that we're doing is still the same work, and it's just applied in a different way. And so I think that don't let it be scary. Don't be intimidated by it. I've had some of my greatest personal growth when I have taken professional leaps that made me feel uncomfortable. So don't be afraid of that discomfort. Lean into it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Anything else you'd like to share? Anything that when you woke up this morning, you were like, oh my gosh, I want to talk about such and such?
No.
No. That's okay too. Oh my goodness. I hope we don't cut that part. I hope that stays in. That was so good. And again, this is like a getting out of your comfort zone a little bit and doing a podcast. You know, I think I just put it on your calendar. I don't know that I even asked. And you were like, why is this on my calendar? Why are you making
it? I think Sandy first asked me if I would be willing to be on her podcast in November of 2024 after I had just joined the team. And I kept saying, maybe someday. Yeah, we'll get to that eventually. And finally, Sandy says, I'm not letting you put this off anymore. I'm just going to throw it on your calendar and make you do it.
Oh my goodness. I love it. Well, and then as you know, the final question that we ask all of our guests is, as the podcast title implies, what is your or was your economic development breakthrough?
Yeah. It goes back a little bit to what I just talked about, I think, about stepping out of your comfort zone. I think in my professional growth and career, that breakthrough moment for me was I'd been in the same role in the same organization for 12 years. And I got a call one day from a colleague at the Maryland Department of Commerce who said to me, we've got a job opening as Director of Regional Growth and Retention. You should apply. And I never would have applied if not for that phone call, because I never would have thought I could do it. But I did. And I was offered the job. And it was a huge transition to go from working in a small community to working at the statewide level, never managing people before, to now managing 12 people who worked all across the state, in remote offices. And again, this theme that we've talked about today, that broadening of the lens, that change of perspective, is really, I think, what that position and the broadening of the lens to see the different communities across Maryland in a different way gave me the skills and that flexing of the muscle that I think lets me do the work that I do today at PPR Strategies, applying all that we know about economic development to communities of all different sizes and shapes and personalities. So that was probably one of the most impactful decisions I've made in my career.
Very, very cool. I know people always ask you, and we started this conversation out that way. People always ask you, why did you make this change? And people ask me, how did you get her? How did you get Heather on the team? And I just respond that I am just the luckiest woman in the world. We've got literally the dream team, and I truly could not be happier to, have you in the family like this. And for everybody else, some of who have done podcasts, and I would encourage you to listen to Mia or Kayla's podcasts. I think we are scheduling one with Sophie soon, and we'll get Meg and Callie on the on the hook here also. But Heather, thank you for trusting us, trusting the team, and for being here and kind of leaning in every single day to support communities in a new and different way. I really appreciate and value you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I love what we do.
Well, thank you for listening to the latest episode of the EDO Breakthrough. If you've gotten to the end and you loved it, we'd love it if you could leave us a review or something, or provide any feedback. We'd obviously love to hear questions, topics that you would like covered. Certainly open to that. You can visit pprstrategies.com and click on the EDO Breakthrough podcast link there for other episodes and to, leave your thoughts and ideas. So until next time, can't wait to talk to you soon.
The EDO Breakthrough podcast is brought to you by PPR Strategies. PPR Strategies, standing for People and Places Reimagined, is a strategic consulting firm working specifically with EDOs and other place-based organizations. We share the unique stories of communities through communication, strategic planning, marketing, media relations, and more. Visit us at pprstrategies.com and find our contact information in the show notes. I'd like to give a big thank you to you for listening. Remember, together we are unstoppable.